Well, hey everybody, this podcast is being brought to you by my zebra Danio and me. Hopefully you can see him swimming around in there. Okay, let's get started. I'll put him away. I really enjoyed the presentations that you did the other day, and as I said, everyone will receive a full credit for doing that. So next time you get grades, that will be included in your grade. I'd like to talk to you a bit about formalizing the approach to doing a presentation. The reason I didn't give you background information about putting a presentation together was I wanted to see what you did on your own, and now that you've done that, and you did a very nice job with that, by the way, I'm going to direct you a little bit through a process that will help you the next time you're asked to do a presentation. So get your notebooks if you don't already have them. You can pause the recording and then come back with your notebook as I walk you through this process. So as many of you reported and shared with us in class, the first thing you do is to talk about the research question that you have come up with when you're doing your presentation. Many of you did that, but it's important to let the audience know what it was you were actually researching. So the first step is to have your research question and share that with the audience. The second thing you do is you are making claims about your question. What evidence do you have? What observations did you make? What are those claims that you are thinking that are going to come true about the question that you're asking? So you start with a question and then you make claims. And as I just mentioned, the next thing you do is provide evidence. What is the evidence that supports the claim that you're making about the question that you have stated? So the evidence comes in the forms of data. It comes in the forms of observation. It comes in the forms of, maybe you've got a photograph from one week to the next week to the next week to the next week, and you can use that as evidence to support the claims that you are making. One of the things you need to do is then justify your evidence. So you are making sure that people understand that based on the evidence that you have, the conclusions that you're drawing are reasonable conclusions. You're justifying your evidence. It's also possible that you may have alternative claims. So you say, here's my first claim, but I also think it might be this. And then one of the things that you are going to end up doing eventually is challenging those claims and finding out that maybe they aren't correct. But you'll need to also provide the evidence and justification for the alternative claims that you are making. So hopefully you wrote all of those points down in your notebook. And again, they were a research question, the claim that you're making, the evidence that you're making based on the claim, and then justifying the evidence, those four. And then also you could have an alternative claim, and then you'll challenge your alternative claim. All of that is in what we call a rubric that we have for you for the oral presentation. And if you didn't write it down, you can get it here. The link for this is on the website. So go back to the website when you're done here and print this out, and you'll see that it makes some more sense. So when you then use a rubric, you know what the teacher is asking for you to do with the assignment, but it's also a way for you to check yourself. So let's walk through this rubric and then I'll give you the assignment. So the first one is the claim. Was the claim sufficient? And you could score yourself as a 0, meaning it was not sufficient, or a 1, that it was sufficient. And then, was that claim accurate? In other words, did you have evidence to back up the claim, and was that claim actually accurate? So again, a 0 or a 1. You can also put in comments or suggestions as you are working through this rubric. The second thing is the evidence. Does it include data? Does it include analysis of the data? And does it include interpretation of the analysis? And was it used appropriately? Did it have reliable references that were accurately cited? In some cases, some of those may not apply. So you could just put an NA for not applicable, but be careful that you don't put in an NA when you really should have addressed something. Then we have the justification. We have the challenge if there was a challenge. Then what about the language of science? Were the scientific terms used correctly? Were they terms that we used in class? Things like that. And then the mechanics are, if you wrote something on a poster paper, did you include sentences that had a capital letter and a period at the end? Did you have subject-verb agreement that made sense? Did you have proper punctuation and capitalization? And then you can score yourself. There's 15 points there, and you can score yourself out of 15. I would like to add one other thing to this rubric, and that is there's a space right above the word claim. You need to have a question, and we don't have the word question on this rubric, but we'll alter the rubric a little bit and get another copy. But where that blank space is above the word claim, write the word question in there. And if you wrote down a question, obviously you'd get a point or not a point for that. So what I'd like you to do now is I will direct you back to the recording of yourself doing your presentation the other day. I'd like you to watch just yourself, and it'll be obvious how you find yourself on that presentation. When you click on that link to go to the presentation, it may ask your computer to download something in Adobe Connect. Tell it yes, tell your computer yes, because you do need that little application in order to look at the video. Then at the very, very bottom of the screen, there's a scroll bar, and it has times on it, and if you drag it over to the right-hand side, it'll give you a time. So whatever time is listed beside your name, just drag it over to that point, and then you can watch just yourself. And I know we all look silly on video, but that's the way it is. Watch yourself, give yourself a score on this rubric page that you've printed, and bring that to class with you next week. Okay? If you have any questions about that, please just let me know. I also said that we are going to talk about what happens to the water when the fish is excreting both, solid waste and liquid waste, because it creates a situation in the water based on the ammonia that is coming out in the form of waste. And that ammonia is changed into a product of nitrogen that's either called a nitrite or a nitrate. Well, the plants in the water are using the nitrogen, but in some cases, if there's too much nitrogen, it acts like a fertilizer and it makes the plants grow too much, and the high levels of nitrogen in the water in the form of a nitrite or a nitrate are harmful to the animals that live in the water. So there needs to be a balance of the nitrogen products in the water. So I'm going to direct you to a website that gives you this information in a really nice way. And as you're working through that website, make sure you have your notebooks handy and you're taking notes. And then there are some links in the website, like it says click here, click on that link and go ahead and go to that site so that you can see what other information they're giving you. There's also some quizzes or tests along the way. There's only 1 or 2 questions, so answer those in your notebook. Take really good notes on this, because when you come to class next week, we are going to do an activity where we are going to measure what happens to fish that are placed in a normal concentration of nitrates and nitrites in some water, a low concentration of nitrates and nitrites, and then a very high concentration of nitrates and nitrites. And we're going to see what happens to the goldfish when they're in those 3 environments, and see if we can draw some conclusions about what happens when there's an imbalance or an out of balance amount of nitrates and nitrites in the water. Okay, so that's it. Have fun with this material this week, and as always, if you have questions, please let me know. Thanks.